We all want our recipes to be the best. Today's author says there's no such thing as the best, and yet she's written a book obsessed with the best. Welcome to Everything Cookbooks, the podcast for writers, readers, and cooks. This is Kristin Donnelly, and I'm here with Molly Stevens. Hey, Molly.
Hey, Kristin.
Today's book by Ella Quittner came out in February, and it is, I think, unlike any cookbook I've ever seen.
I mean, I heard about it because there's been a lot of buzz around it. And yet, when I sat down with it, I was really blown away.
Yeah. So she identifies the best version of a biscuit or a chocolate chip cookie or vodka sauce.
24 different foods.
And best for her. She very clearly states what she is looking for. And then ran all these very rigorous tests to try to achieve that. And then later shot them all in these like flat lays so you can see the differences. But like that's already a book, right?
Yeah. A complicated, labor-intensive book.
Yes. But then there are these really incredibly written, funny essays. And I'm trying to look for the right word because it's like there are tangents, but they're really fun. It's just a fun ride and fun read.
But they're sardonic, they're intellectual, they're global in big thinking essays.
Big thinking. Yes. It's like she travels and has, I mean, the whole book is based on obsession, right? So she travels to answer a question that she's obsessed with, but she also meets with these other obsessives.
Right.
And then photography. Yes, we talked about the flat lays, but then there's this incredible artistic photography.
Perhaps that's part of what sort of surprised me. There's this circus car element to this book in that the cover is like, oh, I get it. But when you open it up, it's just so much more.
Yeah, it's so much more than like an America's Test Kitchen type situation.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very personal book. It's the best for her and how she got there. And how she got there is often like a winding road.
She talks about meaning, the meaning of life. I mean, it's big.
It is big. So Ella Quittner, she's a culture journalist and screenwriter in addition to being a food writer. And she's written for the New York Times, T Magazine, New York Magazine, The New Yorker, Time, Wall Street Journal, Man Repeller. She actually has a background in finance. Her backstory is really interesting, and we're not going to talk a ton about it. But we will link to the Cherry Bomb podcast and the Taste podcast where they did talk to her extensively about her road in food writing. So we'll focus on the book because there's so much to cover.
Yeah.
Can't wait to talk to her. Ella, welcome to Everything Cookbook. So happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm a big fan and super excited to be here.
Thank you so much. There are a lot of interviews with you around that we want to link to because your backstory is really interesting, going from finance, Food 52, and food. And I want our listeners to hear that, but we're going to send them elsewhere for a lot of that backstory so we can focus on your incredible book.
Thank you.
Molly and I were just blown away, having worked on cookbooks, how much work it must have taken. I know it came from the column you did from Food 52 to an extent, but we were wondering, how did that origin story of the book come?
So that came about because I had signed with a book agent actually for a novel that I've been working on. I think I'd signed with her in like 2022. In the course of one of our conversations, I said, also, should we think about doing a cookbook and book of essays that's sort of centered around this concept? And she said, well, do a proposal. Let's take a look. Let's see. And I threw it together and we kind of iterated on it for a few months. That's kind of how that process started and like preempted what we'd originally wanted to work together on. But luckily she does a lot of stuff across sort of like fiction and cookbooks. So she was the perfect person to be able to shepherd this side quest project. But the actual inception of the why beyond thinking about that column I used to write and my interest in the subjects of sort of internet virality and, the intersection of culture and food, I've always been an incredibly obsessive and neurotic person. this book is very much how my brain works. Not necessarily how I cook casually. People are often surprised to hear I do not really cook with recipes. This is just sort of how I thought about if I was going to contribute something to the deep and marvelous canon of cookbooks, of which I've been a sort of like student, historian, collector, admirer for, my entire life. What could I even contribute? And it's this.
Was your original proposal, does it look kind of like this?
Yeah, it absolutely does. This has come up a lot since the book came out. People are surprised to hear that it is very similar. There's a few key differences, but the actual structure is very similar. This combination of these head-to-head bench tests, which lead into recipes that I've developed based on the results and write-ups of the findings, and then reported cultural essays that punctuate the book about people who are obsessed with, going to extreme or bizarre lengths to be the best in a culinary sense. There are some details that changed. For example, there were some, often when you do a cookbook proposal, you actually have to write out kind of like a fake TOC.
Yeah.
So some of the dishes changed a little. Honestly, not that much. Definitely had a few that got cut. I think I had closer to 30 sections, and the book was getting so long. We ended up at 24 food sections. The biggest thing in my mind that's different is I had put ideas for reported essays into the TOC, but then when I started to get into the writing and reporting and traveling process, I was like, what was I thinking? They were just much more impersonal than where I landed.
Yeah, which is really fun and interesting, and it's different from other books. I was wondering, do you remember what you ended up putting in the proposal as your sample material?
Yes, let me pull it up.
And the reason I'm asking this is because I feel like when we talk with authors or aspiring authors, they're surprised at the amount of content that is a good idea to include in their proposal.
As was I. So sample recipe. So this is not in the book. Latke breakfast sandwiches.
Fun. Yum.
I'm like, oh, I should have put that in. I totally forgot about this. And here I have a no-churn bananas Foster brown butter split. That's right. I wanted to do a no-churn ice cream head-to-head section, which is one of the ones that was on the cutting room floor. And here I have adult SpaghettiOs, which is in the book, but this isn't the recipe.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many telling things about this proposal, and since listeners can't see it, but that the head-to-head tests, the graphic, which is so striking and such a big part of the book, was there from the beginning. Really interesting. Yeah. You joke in the text that HarperCollins made the mistake of giving you money to write a book. How did you land on working with HarperCollins?
We took the proposal to auction. So we met with a bunch of different publishers. We did a traditional auction, where people who were interested submitted bids. I went with HarperCollins because I loved the editor that I met with, Cassie, who edited the book. And also, I believe they were the highest bidder. I would have to fact check that for myself. But I knew that I wanted to basically garner the biggest possible advance since this project required so much travel. I mean, like months of travel and a huge amount of testing, which I not only needed to have help to do, so I needed to be able to hire people to come cook with me, but also the actual ingredients were such a high cost. Like, not just for the testing, but also for the shoot. That was a huge line item.
Yeah.
So money was kind of important for the project to make it work.
What sort of timeline did they give you once you signed?
Initially, I believe it was around 18 months. And then we extended slightly. About 2 years later, I turned in the manuscript and the photos. And then I remember I was surprised. It took many months for me to get edits back.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that would be the case. And that ended up kind of pushing the pub date back quite a bit. Because those edits then had to flow back through me and then back through them and then back through me and then back through them. And then we entered layout, which ended up taking a really long time and was very iterative. We kind of had many pub dates over the years that got pushed back until finally it came out this February.
Got it. How was it being like a February book? How do you feel about that?
I was nervous going into it because I think February books have a weird reputation in the cookbook industry, right?
Totally.
And my worry was February is sort of a depressing time. I mean, it's such a depressing time that we have like full meme accounts about how bad February is, right?
Yeah, it's short, but it's long. And
yeah. So I was a little worried about morale and getting people excited about a book, especially a book that there are a lot of easy and quick recipes in it. But I think when people look at the book, they think it's a book about perfectionism and more labor intensive recipes. So I was worried about that, like asking a bunch of depressed people to get excited about a project-based book in a month that is extremely dull and depressing. But it ended up feeling like the actual pub date didn't really matter. Yeah. Now when I look back on the launch and the book tour and the press and everything, I feel like it could have been at any time. The book launch process ends up just being pretty much exactly what you put into it. Mm-hmm. Kind of like a wedding. You know, you're planning this thing forever. And there are like 800 moving pieces between you sending frantic emails to 200 people, you know, just like begging them to read the book, cover the book, send the book to someone. You're doing a huge amount of social media content creation, promoting the book and posting that in a strategic way. You've become a professional events planner because, you know, modern publishers don't really send you on a book tour. You have to do that all yourself unless you're kind of a major celebrity or influencer.
Yeah.
So you're wearing all of these crazy hats and you go into this sort of like fugue state where the only thing you're thinking about is like, this thing is coming up and here are the things I need to do for it. And then when it happens, here are the things I need to do after. And also, by the way, every day while it's going on, you're like going on social media and reposting people and answering people's questions and thanking everyone. And bookstores are telling you they got it back in stock. So you're telling people it's there. So it really doesn't matter when it is. It's like out of time and space.
Yeah. That makes sense to me.
Did you do a lot of events around it?
I did so many events around it. I did events in New York, Los Angeles, Seattle, Portland, Sacramento, Marin County, San Francisco, and then one overseas in London.
Nice. Was it published in the UK at the same time?
No, it was published about 2 months later.
We should actually get back to talking about the writing. You traveled, you wrote these essays. But then you did have all this head-to-head testing going on. And we were just wondering what that process looked like.
It was complete chaos. I also was maintaining other jobs at the time as well. So it wasn't travel, reporting, testing, head-to-head stuff, recipe development, social media stuff. And then at the time I was also doing freelance journalism. So I was taking on story assignments. So some days I would just have to go back to being a newspaper reporter and writer. Mm-hmm. Some days I was working in development for showrunners for television. So some days I would be spending the day on Zoom talking to folks about breaking pilots and giving notes on scripts. It was really all over the place. And the travel and testing, I think the chaos of that and the sort of like tap dance between the two actually ended up benefiting me quite a bit because I would be inspired by things in my travels that I hadn't expected to use in other sections that actually would then inform those sections. Or I was able to kind of like braid it all together depending on, okay, I've scheduled this trip around this specific thing I want to attend. And then I would go and be like, oh, conveniently, I haven't done pancakes yet. And I'm going to Japan because I planned this trip around these dueling ramen festivals. So because I haven't done the pancake section yet, I can actually do research on Japanese-style souffle pancakes.
Mm. Yeah, because in the writing of the book or the reading of the book, there's something it's like a meta cookbook in a way, because it's about the making of the book as much as it's about the book itself. When I'm reading it, I'm very aware of you making this book. So you'll be talking about the photo shoot in a chapter header or something. And so 24 base recipes. And then those cultural essays and your various travel, did that change? I mean, was that a moving target all along and it just sort of kept crystallizing as you got closer? Or did you know, like, okay, I'm going to Tokyo, I'm going to see Scott Peacock, I'm going to, do these various things?
Total moving target. As far as the culinary research, things like going to see Scott Peacock so that I could learn a biscuit technique or talk to him about how Edna Lewis specifically docked and cut biscuits, or things like the research for the actually chewy fresh pasta section that took place throughout Italy and Japan, or the meatball section, those would come because as I would start to think about how I wanted to test those specific kind of culinary endeavors, I would realize there was either a hole in what I knew or like something specific I wanted to report so that I could do a more fulsome and thoughtful version of that chapter. The travel for the essays was so much more kind of what I think the words used were crystallized as it happened, because so much of it was me saying, okay, it might be interesting to go to a prosciutto festival in Parma, but not having a specific idea for how that would turn into an essay, just kind of hoping when I showed up, the angle would present itself or it would feel theoretically or conceptually tied to some other thing I'd attended. And to that end, there's a lot of stuff I did that didn't even make it into essays or was only mentioned in a passing way. I attended the State Fair of Texas and interviewed a bunch of concessionaires about this competition that takes place every year to basically invent the best new state fair food. That is maybe only mentioned in passing there. The prosciutto festival is only kind of mentioned in passing in there. And then things became sort of more meaningful to me that I didn't expect to become meaningful to me, like a random meal I had with my dad while I was in Japan.
Yeah, that story is crazy.
And that's really different from how I actually approach reporting typically. So that was surprising to me, but kind of cool.
In what way?
Well, usually if I'm traveling for a story, I've already figured out what the sort of approach or angle of the story is in order to get the assignment, either because an editor reached out to me and said, hey, can you cover XYZ thing? Or because I reached out to an editor and said, hey, this thing's coming up and I think it could be really interesting from the perspective of this, which ties into this. And, we're at the intersection of the GLP era and TikTok brain rot. And so I want to explore it and talk to people who are like X, Y, and Z. So you go into it with a plan. And in fact, the Texas State Fair is an example of that, because in addition to attending that for book research, I was also attending it because I was covering for the New York Times basically a sort of fair food scandal at the time, which involved fair food called deep fried pho. And so that, immediately I had a much clearer plan of, okay, I got to go into the fair. I have to talk to the people who are serving the deep fried pho. I have to go to the restaurant of the people who were going to, but then couldn't. I have to go taste both versions. And I have to talk to like 30 people at the fair who are eating it about what they think about it and what they think about the scandal and what they think about the drama. Whereas for the book, I was like, yes, I'm interested in basically the idea of fair food and concessionaire culture and how it fits into whatever ideals we have of like some sort of new American dream and social mobility in America, which is like immediately so vague.
Right.
And I did interview some people and they said really interesting stuff, and I'm sure I could write an essay about it. But just as I sat down to write the book, other things sort of like popped out.
More so.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so fun as a writer to go into something without that set angle or...
It's fun, but it's also scary because you're not necessarily going to get what you need. And you might come home and be like, oh, wait, I actually want to write about this, but I didn't talk to anyone about that.
Yeah. It sounds like you have a deep knowledge of cookbooks. And we were wondering, like, just how big is this cookbook collection and how much were you using it throughout the writing of the book?
I would guess I have more than 100 and fewer than 200 cookbooks. I'm hesitating because I am having a baby in a few months.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. I've been decluttering my entire apartment. And so I recently was forced under great emotional duress to donate some of my books. So I'm trying to recap it based on this. I have a lot of cookbooks. I use them very, very readily during the process. I also have a lot of cookbooks on Kindle. And often when I'm reporting something for this book type of a project, where it's like I'm tracing a culinary method or I'm trying to figure out tweaks or something, someone said, I will just instantly get a new cookbook digitally so that I can search for it. But I'm constantly opening up my hard copy cookbooks and I reference them a lot. And especially in my mind, I would say my cookbook collection is divided into almost 2 or 3 parts. One part is sort of like encyclopedic cookbooks, like The Joy of Cooking, The New Basics, or How to Cook Everything, big cookbooks that are silver palette that have like 1 trillion recipes and methods in them, which I will use more as a reference text. I would not really necessarily be looking for specific recipes in them as much. And then I have a second category, which is more sort of subject-specific cookbooks. One that comes to mind that I reference all the time, even though it's a newer book, is Natasha Pekowitz's More Than Cake.
Yep.
She's a very, very thoughtful pastry chef and writer, and her testing is pretty immaculate. So I'll use those books more flipping to specific recipes to see what people are saying about that and what kind of testing they've done or what techniques they like. And then I have a third category of cookbooks, which I would refer to, I guess, as sort of a leisure cookbook, which I like. I love to collect 1970s, 1960s cookbooks that have really just sort of bizarre recipes that feel more just like a snapshot of the time. And often the art is super fun. And I just love to flip through them almost like I would a novel. And I have cooked from my leisure cookbooks, but usually it's for a theme party.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense.
I think it's a really interesting thing that you've done in this book because of your deep experience with cookbooks, and you're referencing everyone from Marcella Hazan to Dan Pelosi to, Joy, as you mentioned. So we sometimes get questions from people like, how do I say where this came from? And I think your book is a great example of acknowledging your sources. And you also use footnotes, which is not something we see in cookbooks all the time.
Yeah, I have a lot of anxiety about that because I'm not a chef. I'm very much a self-taught home cook who did not go to culinary school, who sort of landed in a food media job. And I did grow up cooking, and I obviously have deep roots in recipes. And when I think back to the various kind of culinary cultures I was raised in and traditions I was raised in, all of that is very real. And my parents did teach me to cook, but I don't ever want anyone to think that I think I'm like God's gift to cooking, right? It's like I didn't go to some fancy school and learn how to make every mother sauce with my eyes closed. I'm kind of just doing what the home cook is doing.
That's what I think is so interesting because it's a cookbook writer's cookbook. You've done all this research on cookbooks, and we've talked about this on the show where I wrote a recipe for roast chicken. So I did what you did. A lot of cookbook authors do that. They go through every recipe for roast chicken that they can get their hands on, and then they come up with their own version. But you've done it in this very transparent way. It's like, that's what this book is about. It's about looking at all the roast chickens out there, looking at all the poached eggs out there, and then coming up with your own. So it just goes back to that comment of mine about it being such a meta cookbook. But yet it's highly personal, too.
I guess that's the reporter in me.
Yeah.
Yeah, personal, as you're saying, because in the end with the best, it's like the best is for you. And every single section, it's like, this is what you're trying to achieve. I heard your interview with Chris Kimball. He wanted to have these like food fights, and he's like, my best biscuit is made in 15 minutes and yours takes an hour. And you're like, that's nice for you. Like,
totally. I was like, that's great, Chris. I'm so happy for you that you found that, because that is sort of my mission too. I'm not trying to indoctrinate people and be prescriptive and say you have to do it my way. I'm like, look, I did all of this work. I like a biscuit that is flaky and layered in accordion style that you can peel apart. That's very dramatic. If you too like that, here's how I would recommend achieving it. But this is why I included all of these other recipes in addition to the mother recipes throughout the book, because sometimes you have a different aim, you have different needs, there's a different technique. In the roast chicken section, I have a 1 hour roast chicken, and I have an opulent roast chicken that brines for 3 days.
Right.
So
every recipe includes the skill level, the time, along with the yield. And in reading the book, I feel like you have a very high awareness of effort and results. And you even say, I think in the chocolate cake, that you threw out the Ruth Rogers one because it took 2 hours. So there are times when you're willing to invest more effort, and there are times when you aren't. But there's an awareness that sometimes, it's a Chris Kimball and I want a quick biscuit, but other times you figured out when it's worth it, I guess. So it goes back to what you said earlier about you didn't want people to think that this is a hard book, because it's not. A lot of things are super fast and easy.
Yeah, I think that is a misconception, and I've seen a little bit of that. I feel like there was like some Amazon reviewer that was like, why would I want to do 10 steps for soft scrambled eggs? And I want to be like, no, read the steps. They're really easy. It takes like 6 minutes. It's just I'm like using a lot of detail because, for example, my husband, who has been in our kitchen maybe twice in my life, recently decided he wanted to learn how to scramble eggs, probably coinciding with all of my travel. He's like, I should know one thing. And I was like, read the book. I have it in the book.
It's
and
all there for you.
now he has one dish. Now he knows how to soft scramble eggs because it's very, very detailed. But that doesn't mean it's hard, or I'm not like saying you should make a croquembouche with your scrambled eggs.
Right.
It's also fun because I feel like each section there is basically a TLDR for somebody like me, where I'm like, I just want to see like where you landed with your method. And then I'm like, okay, got it, you know?
And then if you don't like that, you can keep flipping or whatever.
Yeah. You mentioned your dad in the acknowledgments and how he was like asking all these questions. You sent him the recipes before he even got to testing. But then in the recipes, you know, occasionally there's these asides or there are reassurances or something very specific. One that kind of gave me a little chuckle because it was talking about having damp hands with the biscuits, but it was like damp from the sink.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, was that her dad being like...
Yeah, what's going on here? The most complex recipe he tested was the fresh egg pasta.
Okay.
And as you can imagine, because that's quite a detailed recipe, even though, again, it's not very hard to execute. It's just like a lot of words because I want you to get it. Got a lot of feedback from him on that. Some of which was incorporated for clarity and some of which was appreciated but moved past.
Is that like your normal recipe writing style though, or was it heavily influenced by the testers?
Oh, I think most of the recipes are in my normal recipe style, but I had many rounds of cross tests across most of the recipes, both professional cross testers and not, because I actually think you get a huge difference in commentary from like your parents versus someone who does this for a living who's trying not to annoy you. You know, like someone who's like doing this for a living has all these tools and scales and things, and they're just very professional about it. And a home cook who's, you know, maybe at a high skill level, but isn't used to sort of like cookbook literacy will just point out stuff that you wouldn't otherwise see. So I did incorporate a lot of that. And then actually a lot of these recipes, I then had to go in and shorten in a final pass a lot because some of them are quite verbose. I remember in the layout, we were able to cut like 30 to 40 pages just by me shortening and tightening sort of orphaned text. That was like the final step for a recipe that was on a third or fourth page.
Got it.
Right. And did you have people helping you with research as well?
I had two folks who helped with research and fact checking on the front end mostly. I would say, I'm thinking of going to this thing at this time of year in this place. Are there other places in this region I should reach out to and check out while I'm there? And they might pull a list of potential chefs or people who are teaching things. And then I might use some of that to make appointments or do further research on my own. And that was really helpful.
But they weren't doing the recipe research as much.
I don't recall that, but it was my intention actually when I hired them. And then I think it became sort of seat of my pants like. But I actually, if I did a project like this again, that would be something I would want, and I would try to make myself more organized, because I think part of my thinking was I only know what I know, and I only know how to look for stuff that's like within 3 degrees of what I know.
I so understand that. Yeah, I do.
So people who just like are into food, but coming to it from a different context, even when I talk to my friends, I'm like, hey, I'm testing this. They're like, oh, well, do you know Hillary Sterling once did this with carrots and she steams them and smokes them and roasts them? And I'm like, no, I didn't know that. And I wouldn't have if you didn't say it. So now I can look in her cookbook and figure out what she's doing.
Right. How do you organize all this input, what is coming in? Like the researchers, but more to the point, the recipe testing and cross-testing. And
it's a lot of different Google Docs and sheets. So it's sort of two things. For each of these bench tests, so where I would say I'm going to make biscuits 40 ways, and here are all the things I'm going to test, I would create a very long Google Doc, and each thing I was testing would have its own recipe, even if it was just a subtle tweak from the one before it. So if there were 40 methods, it might be a 40 to 50 page document with 40 to 50 different recipes. So you could just flip through, or if I have someone who's coming over to help me cook and test, they can flip through very easily and not have to be doing the sort of like chess of what we're changing. They're just literally executing these recipes. And specifically for something like cake or biscuits, I would be trying to cut down the actual yield because I didn't want to create like a huge amount of undue food waste. So if it was like quarter batches or half batches, that would be reflected in the recipes. Each recipe would be just literally for like a quarter batch of biscuits or a quarter batch of cake. And then I would have these spreadsheets that were basically a mix of objective and subjective metrics organized as columns. And then on the left side, all the rows would be the 40 methods or whatever, organized into sections like ingredient tweaks, oven temp tweaks, stuff like that. And then basically every time we would test a method, if I was doing it alone, I would just fill in my notes on each of these columns I'd identified, or if I was doing it with someone else, we might use 2 different colors, but input everything into these columns, and they would be anything from sort of more objective and scientific metrics, like with whipped cream. If we were whipping 1 cup of cold cream for every method, we were measuring the volume of whipped cream to find out how much we'd aerated it. So it might just be like the yield of cups of whipped cream, or it might be subjective stuff, mouth feel, or how hard was this, or who would I recommend this to, or who would I punish with this method, or how does it compare to the other ones in this section. And then I would have the recipe in a Google Doc eventually, once I wrote it and tested it and stuff. And every time I had a cross-tester do a test, I would make them their own Google Doc folder and copy the relevant recipes into it so that I could maintain a single version of this sort of working recipe, even if I was getting comments from like 5 places. You're reminding me of something I totally forgot about, which was terrifying, which was like really deep into this process. Everyone who's about to do the photo shoot at this point has access to all of these files because I had to make a version of all of these for the photo shoot, for the food stylist and the photographer and the prop stylist, so they could all prepare for the, what props we would need and ingredients, etc. So like dozens and dozens of people have access to these files. And I was visiting my parents, and my mom and I went and got our nails done. And I remember it was like the first time I'd not been working on this cookbook for a very long time. And I put my phone away for like 20 minutes and I took it out. And I had like 40 texts being like, hey, just so you know, no one can access the Google Docs and like this error's coming up. And for some reason, this crazy thing happened that knock on wood will never happen again and has never happened to me before. But something had happened where Google had flagged my hard drive as having like something illegal in it.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
what?
Wow.
I don't know what. Like, I don't know if it was like
way too much whipped cream.
Yeah, right. Like, I don't know if it was like pornographic in an illegal way or if they thought it was like plagiarized. But it shut down everyone's access to my Google Docs and Drive for 2 days.
Oh.
And I remember just like sweating at my parents' house trying to like contact Google and be like, please fix this. It's just recipes. So many people are using these right now. And it was so stressful. But I couldn't do anything about it. And then eventually the period just passed and everyone could access it again.
It just went away.
Yeah, it was like a 72-hour hold or something.
Wow.
Yeah, it was so stressful.
Wow. That's quite intense. Yes. And the photo shoot, you have these flat lays with all this testing, but then you have these like surrealist images. It looks like from the proposal phase, you were pretty set on this aesthetic, but was there anything that evolved?
A ton. And that was also improvisation that had to happen for functionality. It's like a very, very tall order to get 40 samples of soft scrambled eggs all onto one.
Looking good.
Yeah, looking good, done around the same time. And our food stylist had multiple assistants, so that was helpful because, someone could be you could do like 8 batches of something at once, theoretically, but it was still a huge challenge. So a lot of things ended up being simpler than I think I would have liked. Like in my dream world, I think I would have stylized those head-to-heads a little bit more and maybe done more of them on sheet pans or more. I remember for one, I was like, can we pull out everything from my medicine cabinet? I think it was for whipped cream because I was trying to figure out it's such a boring looking food that you can't really perceive the differences in the techniques all that well from the visual. So I was like, can we put it in martini glasses and cocktail glasses and bodega glasses and little differently shaped glasses and arrange them all in my medicine cabinet? So it's like you've opened a medicine cabinet and there's this like directory of different whipped creams with the labels. And everyone was like, no.
What?
You talk about, I think it's in the mac and cheese intro, about making a cookbook being like a root canal. But then you describe this day on the photo shoot that just sounds completely chaotic. And one of them, you said, wait, I thought we were doing a Dali-like shot. And they're like, no, we can't do it. So
they were like, we're minimalists. Like, we're known for minimalism.
So where is this shoot happening?
My apartment.
Oh my gosh.
And how many days?
Oh, God. Well, we did it over 2 or 3 sessions. I don't remember the exact total number of days, maybe like 12 working days total.
And were the sessions separated by long periods of time? Or
I think the first 2 were separated by a couple weeks.
Okay.
And then the last one was pretty much ended up being defunct, but it was because we wanted to shoot a cover. I had a very specific cover idea, and it just didn't work. And we ended up using kind of like a collage instead of stuff that had been shot for the book. Each of those had days of prep for it. Like the food stylist had to prep for 3 days before the prop stylist had to prep. And people are coming in and out of the house and setting things up, and I'm making cakes, and it was a lot.
When did you do the shot of you in bed with all the desserts?
That was at some point during the shoot when we realized, like, we're not getting any lifestyle. There's nothing of me cooking, and there probably won't be anything of me cooking because I have a very tiny, unphotogenic kitchen that I believe is just photographed in, like, a thumbnail. We had to get really creative about how to get the lifestyle stuff that the publisher would have wanted, of me. So it's more portraiture than cooking stuff.
Yeah.
But it's great that the team was up to shoot. Like, I feel like I've talked to some food stylists who were like, no, I will only shoot in a studio.
Yeah, I don't think they loved it. I remember after the first shoot, everyone was like, what if we revisited that idea of getting a studio for the second one? And I looked into pricing it, or maybe that was for the cover day. But I think that it was such an expensive photo shoot.
Yeah.
When you start to price out these studio test kitchens, which are like thousands of dollars a day, plus everyone's transportation. I think I was like, can we please just do it in my apartment? But that comes with its own challenges as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, your whole place just gets taken over.
Yeah, like months later, you'll be like vacuuming and you'll be like, why is there a pan full of sponge cake under my bureau? And the entire kitchen, dining room, living room was like covered in cakes, debris, pasta at all times.
Yeah, that's devotion.
Well, yeah. I mean, the design of this book is a real feat because it's very, you talked before about the text, it's very dense. I mean, there's a lot of words
There sure
in
are.
this book.
But at the same time, it's not overwhelming.
Exactly.
Chris Cristiano and Renata de Oliveira did an amazing job with that because it was a huge challenge. I turned in so many words. And we used as visual references, because I knew going into it, it would be a very text-heavy project.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I pulled a bunch of visual references from places like the New Yorker, New York Times Magazine, T Magazine, Harper's, things where there are these like giant blocks of text. That they still feel legible and sort of inviting to read, not like some old thing that someone photocopied and is like forcing you to read for school. Right. And I think that was really helpful, especially for formatting the essays, which really are giant text blocks in the middle of what should be sort of like a visual coffee table book.
Yeah.
You say in the front matter, you say, use this book however you want. Jump in, cook a recipe, move on, or read the whole intro and the reasoning. The challenge with that kind of book is if I have information in the intro that I need for the recipe, do I put it in both places? My experience is in many cases you put like a shorthand version of what you would absolutely need, but you say, go back and read the essay if you want more. And I think you've managed to solve that problem that way.
That was all my editor, Cassie Jones.
Okay.
I actually, in what I originally turned in, had all of the information in multiple spots because I know how I use a cookbook and it's not in a linear fashion usually.
Right. Yeah.
And if you tell me to go to page 698 for a thing, I'm like, oh, I have to.
Yep.
So I did put everything everywhere and we had a lot of back and forth. And she really pushed me on that and said, people will think that we just didn't edit this and didn't go through it and didn't notice it. And it will be a big problem for the reader And so she convinced me to basically only have everything in one place. But then I still did get away with, as you're saying, sort of a shorthand version of it. Mm-hmm. So I'm very neurotic. Like, I want people to realize that there's more to the story. And if you really want to know how to do this technique, you should go to page 698.
There are not that many pages.
No, I was going to say it's less than 400.
I know. It's so amazing. It's like, for what it is compact.
If I had my way, it'd be 698.
We just want to know, like, you know, you've done screenplays, books, articles, you're having a baby. Like, what's next?
I'm trying to figure that out. This was an interesting process for me, specifically launching the book into the world, because I think it was the first time I have, and I don't say this in necessarily a negative way, I'm just sort of observing it. It was the first time I've had to commodify myself to that extent. Like, I'm very used to the sort of internet attention economy game of being like, I wrote this article, please read it, please click, please comment, please blah, blah. But that is a very different proposition from me joining the chorus of voices in this sort of consumption era of like, I'm a person online who's asking you to spend $30+ on a thing just because you trust me. You know what I mean? It's a very different proposition than just like, I made this article and you can read it for free and all I'm asking is for a minute of your time or even just a click or like. And I didn't understand how profoundly involved and interesting that process would be. I guess I'm still at the end of it, but it definitely gave me a new perspective on sort of all of the projects I have on my slate. Because I always thought until I launched this book, the hard part of doing things is like making them, getting them sold, convincing other people to believe in them, fund them, or champion them if there's gatekeepers in between you and the product being out in the world. And now I understand that it's actually an extremely personal endeavor, right? You really have to become these like 6 to 8 jobs we were talking about earlier, and you really have to believe in the thing, and you really have to like live in it fully and not be doing the other stuff while you're kind of launching it out into the world and talking to people about it and explaining it. And all this to say, I have been giving a lot of thought to what's next in that context, right? I'm not just like, okay, what's next? What did I say I would do? What's on my plate? What's the thing I'm furthest on? I'm like, what do I want to say next? What do I want to contribute next? What do I really care about getting in front of other people next? Because I am approaching it now, I guess, more seriously in a sense. Not that it wouldn't be serious if I took a job or whatever, or sold something, but I just understand the back end of it now much better. And I want to feel so invested in whatever does come next that it's like, yes, of course I'm waking up and throwing my whole back into this thing for like months and months to put it in front of people in this very crowded world, because that's just like all I can do and all I want to do, and I can't imagine not doing it. So I'm thinking about it in that context, and the answer is I don't know. I'm working on a novel still. I'm working on some films. I'm working on some TV scripts. Yeah, there's some food stuff in the mix. I'm doing some freelance journalism still, and I've started dabbling in profile writing, which is lower lift, of course, than these book and TV projects in terms of getting it out into the world. So I don't know. I'm experimenting with a lot of stuff and seeing what feels right and what feels like the thing I can't stop doing, I think.
Totally.
Amazing answer.
I think a lot of people identify with that surprise of what it's like to promote a book. It's very different from writing a book and can be exhausting. And then, yeah, as you said, like there's a commodification that can be uncomfortable.
But it's also beautiful and cool because you're, going to these cities where you don't know anyone and dozens of people are showing up and they want to talk to you about this thing. So it's like really also invigorating and exciting and inspirational.
Yeah.
But it's all consuming.
Right. For sure.
So I'm like, what should I be consumed by next? Because I'm realizing these aren't casual endeavors.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
And congratulations on this truly unique contribution.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun. I could talk to you guys all day.
Thank you for listening to Everything Cookbooks. For more about each episode, subscribe to our newsletter, everythingcookbooks.substack.com. Here are some other ways to support the show. You can go to everythingcookbooks.com and check out our totes, t-shirts, sweatshirts, and other merch, or buy us a round of coffee. You can also leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Thanks to our editor, Abby Circatella. Until next time, keep on writing, reading, and cooking.